Welcome back to Luke's Properties YouTube channel. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I lost £5,000 on a nightmare rent-to-rent deal. I'll be taking you back 7 years ago when I first started my rent-to-rent business. This was in my first year of trading. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was making loads of mistakes. And this is another nightmare story of how I lost money on a nightmare rent-to-rent deal. My goal here is to share my bad experiences so you guys don't make the same mistakes. And if I can help just one person not lose £5,000, then making this video is worthwhile. So let's get into it. So I'll take you back 7 years ago, just to set the scene. Similar to my other nightmare rent-to-rent properties, this was my first year of doing rent-to-rent. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was still very naive. I didn't really know the rules and regulations. And at this point, I felt like I had become friends with an estate agents, quite a big established high street estate agents in Newport. I had rented a few properties from them. I thought they would only send me properties that were perfect for my rent-to-rent business. And oh, how wrong I was. So this is the property that you can see. It's a huge 10-bedroom block of flats. As soon as I saw it advertised, I sent someone to go and view it because I was in London. Apparently the viewing went well. I was informed that there was some work that needed doing to the property just to bring it up to standard. But because I was so naive, I just presumed that the work that needed doing wouldn't be that much. Bear in mind at this time, I didn't really know how to price a refurbishment. I didn't really know how much work I should be doing as the rent-to-rent operator. I just saw pound signs and potential. I saw a big 10-bedroom block of flats, and because I wanted the deal so badly, I just presumed I could make it work because the few properties that I had under my belt were all working well for me and they were all making money. So at this point, I thought I had the Midas touch. I thought everything I took on would work as a rent-to-rent, and oh, how wrong I was. So without thinking too much, the estate agent was telling me that other people was interested, getting my emotions up, and because I wanted it so bad, without doing too much thinking, I paid 2 months rent to the estate agent to secure the deal, which was £2,000 times 2, so £4,000 in total. I did this whilst I was in London, and again, I hadn't seen the property. I was just going off what the person who viewed it for me had told me. They took a couple pictures and sent them to me, and from what I could see, the property had potential, and I felt like, at the time, I could turn it around and rent it. I already had groups of contractors that were contacting me, asking for a 10-bedroom. They were willing to pay me a premium, so my confidence was sky high at this point. And I just felt like if we could paint and decorate and improve the property, I'll be able to move in the contractors in a few weeks. They'd be paying me a premium. Happy days. So we started to go to work on improving the property. We organised a rubbish removal and we got some painting decorators in, and they started working on the property. After a few days, I'd already spent around £1,000, which brought my total capital employed to £5,000 at this point. Bear in mind, I still hadn't seen the property myself. The following week, I drove down to Wales, and this was the moment that I saw the property myself. I also organised for one of the potential tenants to come and have a look at the property and see if it made sense for them. This was a bad idea, as once I got to the property, it was in such worse condition than I had thought. I was embarrassed. Even the potential tenant was looking at me like, are you sure you're going to have all this work done in a few weeks' time? Because this looks like a full back-to-brick refurb that's needed for this property. And I could tell he was thinking, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. As I was walking around the property inspecting it, I realised it was in terrible condition. There were no lights, and it needed around £30,000 to £40,000 invested into it to really bring it up to standard, which I wasn't willing to commit to, and neither was the landlord. I tried to contact the landlord through the estate agent. He coincidentally became unreachable, and the estate agent told me that the landlord had gone away. So here I was, stuck with this huge 10-bedroom in terrible condition, with a potential tenant looking around with me, side-eyeing me, probably thinking, there's no way this property is going to be ready in a few weeks' time. I left the property that afternoon feeling dazed and confused. I had made a bad decision, and I remember all I could hear was like a ringing in my ears. Like, I was just very shocked. That sort of feeling lasted for the whole weekend, really. Even driving back down to London, I was quiet, just in my own head, thinking, I've messed up here. The following Monday, I asked the agent if the landlord could make some improvements because the property wasn't ready to be rented at all. And I said to the agent they shouldn't have even rented it to me in this condition. The agent responded, the property was rented as seen and you did do a viewing, which I did. I couldn't really argue with that point. And I did give the green light. I signed a contract and I paid the 2 months. so I didn't really have a leg to stand on. It was at this stage that I realised this agent wasn't my friend at all. He had seen me coming and he'd stitched me up, because this property wasn't ready to be rented at all. But because he knew I was keen and I was new to the business, he took advantage of me, and it was my own fault for being too keen and thinking everyone's my friend, because they're really not. Once I realised the landlord wasn't going to spend any money on improving the property, I asked for a refund. But of course, the agent said I couldn't get a refund because that's not how things work. The property was rented to me as seen. I asked to get a refund on my deposit at least, and the agent said because I had signed a common law tenancy, my deposit hadn't been registered in any deposit scheme, so the landlord had my deposit, and he had now coincidentally become unreachable. Needless to say, I fell out with this estate agent. We had an argument. There was no way I could refurbish this property myself, as it wasn't my asset, so that didn't make any sense. So I had to give the property back, suck it up, and walk away, which was painful because I was already £5,000 in, and I had these tenants who wanted a 10-bedroom to live in. So at this point I remember feeling very stressed. I felt like the walls were closing in, so I had to make a decision. I had to put my pride to the side and just cut my losses, which hurt because I was £5,000 in the hole. This was all part of my learning curve, right? So the key lessons that I learned here were: always view high investment properties yourself. I think you should always view properties yourself in the beginning, especially when you don't quite know what you're doing, you don't quite know the rules, you don't quite know how to price a refurb up. You should go and lay eyes on the property yourself. You should take photos, take videos, maybe speak to a builder and try and get an understanding of how much the refurbishment will cost. Back then I didn't have a clue. So always view the properties yourself, or maybe bring a builder with you. If it's going to be a lot of work that needs doing, get a few different opinions. Don't just dive in like I did, just because you think you can rent it for more than what you're going to pay. Take some photos, take some videos, speak to a few different builders who know what they're talking about, get a second and third opinion before you make an offer. That's what I would have done different in hindsight. You should get proper refurbishment quotes before you commit. Another lesson I learned was to avoid situations where you can't speak directly to the landlord. When you do a rent-to-rent deal through an estate agent, make sure you can still have contact with the landlord. If you can't, then when things go wrong, you have to go through the estate agent. And if the estate agent has hundreds of other properties on their books, you're not going to be a priority. It's going to take weeks before they get back to you, and in that time you could just be losing money. So in hindsight, I would avoid situations where I can't speak to the landlord directly myself. Another lesson I learned was not to invest heavily into properties that I don't own. The goal of rent to rent is to invest minimal capital into the property because you don't own the property. You need to make the property look as appealing as possible on a budget. You need to improve the perceived value, not necessarily the actual value. So the refurbishments you should be doing should be mainly cosmetic, not back to brick, not plastering, not adding bathrooms, not adding kitchens. It should be surface level, cosmetic refurbishing and furniture. That's the goal with a rent-to-rent refurb. Maybe some carpets, maybe some laminate flooring at a push, but no more than that. It's not your asset. Another lesson I learned was not all agents are your friends. They may seem like that in the beginning, but it's just business. And if you're new to the rent-to-rent business and you're very keen, then some agents will try and stitch you up with their underperforming properties or with their nightmare landlords. Anything that's not working for them, they may try and give to you. And because you're naive and you want a deal so bad, you might just take it on without really doing your due diligence. So remember, not all agents are your friends, and sometimes they haven't got your best interests at heart. So really make sure you analyze a deal before you take it on, and make sure you have a genuine relationship with the estate agent. Some of them are going to see you as competition, and some of them might even try and stitch you up. So be aware of that. The main lesson I learned from this rent-to-rent deal is that painful mistakes do make for the best lessons. So I learned so much from this house. I learned what not to do going forward, and overall this experience made me a better rent-to-rent operator. The outcome of this rent-to-rent deal is I lost £5,000, but after I stopped sulking, I picked myself up. I gained so much confidence because I realised that this is the worst that could happen. I would never make this mistake again. And if losing £5,000 was the worst thing that could happen, then so be it, because I had other properties that were doing really well, that were making me a few £1,000s a month at this point. So in hindsight, there's always going to be pros and cons. And up until this point, I felt like I couldn't lose. I felt like I was just winning with every deal. So really, it was only right that I took a L, that I made a mistake. Because I was still so new to the business, I had to make some mistakes, and this was one of them. But I learned so much from it, and overall, this made me a better rent-to-rent operator. It gave me thicker skin. I wasn't so naive after this deal. I realised all agents weren't my friends, and overall, I became a much better businessman. So I may have lost £5,000, but I gained confidence, clarity, and direction. I knew exactly what I wanted, the exact type of properties I wanted, and the exact type of landlords that I wanted to work with. From this point on, I stopped working with this estate agent and I focused solely on direct to landlord deals. And a few months after this nightmare rent to rent deal, I actually got a 10-bedroom block of flats from a really good landlord who I still work with today. And he's such a good guy. We get on so well and we make around £2,000 a month from his 10-bedroom block of flats. And it's just so easy and effortless. He gets value from our service. We enjoy working with him. It's the perfect win-win scenario. So there's always a silver lining around the corner. Sometimes you just have to go through the fire to get there. After this nightmare rent to rent deal, my business got stronger. I improved as an entrepreneur. My skills developed. And from then on, we only really targeted landlords directly, which improved the business, made it more efficient, and allowed us to make more profit. So this was how I lost £5,000 on a nightmare rent to rent deal. I hope you've taken some value from this video. Don't make the same mistakes that I did. Learn from my mistakes. Now, if you want someone to help you build your rent to rent business and get your first few rent to rent properties, then I'll put a link in the video description below. Click the link and you'll be able to book in a free call with myself. On that call, we'll get to know each other. We'll work out if we're a good fit for each other and if I'll be a good mentor for you. If not, then keep watching my YouTube videos and don't make the same mistakes that I did. I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys. And as always, I'll see you on the next one.